Namaste and hello. This is your Sanskrit instructor welcoming you back into lesson number 234. And in this lesson, we are going to go over some examples on when it is appropriate and how to use the absolute phrases. So remember, in the previous lesson, we said that an absolute phrase can be translated into Sanskrit by the locative absolute. So the subject is in the locative case and the participle agrees with it, with that subject in the gender, number, and case. So that would also have to be in the locative case. And then the present participle is used if the action of the absolute phrase is simultaneous with that of the main clause. And then active or passive is used according to the voice. So here's our first example. So soldiers throwing arrows, the general mounted his horse. Or while the soldiers were throwing arrows, the general mounted his horse. So soldiers throwing the arrows, that is one thought, that's a different subject and a different verb from the general mounting on his horse. So the soldiers are going to, and this is how we're using the absolute phrase. So the soldiers is going to be in the locative, plural, masculine. So that's how you end up with sainikeshu. Throwing arrows, that's going to be an active participle denoting an action simultaneous with that of the main clause. So the main clause is that the general mounted his horse. That is the main clause. So you can just think about the soldiers throwing arrows, or while the soldiers were throwing their arrows. That's just something to add in as detailed. To add in as a detail into the sentence. But the main clause is that the general mounted his horse. So again, going back, the present participle is used if the action of the absolute phrase is simultaneous with that of the main clause. So that's why you're using the present participle here, because it's happening while the general is mounting his horse. The soldiers were throwing arrows. So that's why you have the active participle denoting an action simultaneous with that of the main clause. So you have present active participle to throw, and that's kshipatsu. Okay? And then that has to be in accordance with, it's used according to the voice of the participle. And then that subject put in the locative case and the participle has to agree with each other. So you have sainikeshu, kshipatsu, that is both in decline in the locative. Arrows, that's accusative plural because that's just the subject of the sentence. So you have ishun, and then you end up with the rest of the sentence. So sainikeshu, ishun, kshipatsu, senapatir ashwam arudha. Our next example is the burden being carried by the servant, we walked fast. So as the burden was carried by the servant, we walked fast. That's another way of saying it. Again, the burden is being carried by the servant. So that is one thought by itself. We walked fast. That is the main clause again. So this is the main clause right here. So being carried, so the burden being carried by the servant. So the burden is going to be locative singular masculine, bhare. Being carried is also going to be locative singular. So the passive participle denoting an action simultaneous with that of the main clause. So you have udyamane. It is being declined to like kupaha here, because it is going to agree with the burden. Udyamane, locative singular. Kupaha is masculine, so that the burden is being carried, so they're going to agree with each other here. By the servant, so the burden being carried by the servant, instrumental singular. So you have kankarirna, by the servant. And then you end up with, as your final sentence, kankarirna no dyamane, for the vowel sandhi, bhare vayam kshipramacharam. Acharama, that is, char means to walk. So acharama is just regular imperfect tense, active imperfect tense. So active voice imperfect tense, first person plural, acharama. Well, acharama, because kshipram and then acharama. So kankare no dyamane bhare vayam kshipram acharama. Acharama. Okay. So my brother having drunk water after my brother had drunk water, in another word of saying that, I read my lessons. So after my brother had drunk water, I read my lessons, or my brother having drunk water, I read my lessons. So again, my brother having drunk water. Again, I read my lessons is the main clause. My brother having drunk water, my brother is going to be locative singular masculine. The past participle active, this is also going to be in the locative singular masculine as well, denoting an action when precedes that of a main clause. Pitavati is declined like dhimat, so that's also locative singular. Having drunk active part denoting an action, active participle denoting an action which precedes that of the main clause, past participle active. And then water is just the subject of that phrase, so that's in the accusative case. And then you end up with bhratari jalam pitavati parthanaham partham. Then finally, our last example, the garland having been giving. So after the garland was given, the boys sang. So the garland, locative singular feminine, you have malayam, and then having been giving, that's a passive participle denoting an action which precedes that of the main clause. So you have the past participle passive. So you have dattayam. Notice how dattayam is being declined here. So that is the formation of the feminine. So that is locative feminine. That is being declined like lata. Datta becomes datta after adding the long a at the end, and then you're declining it like lata here. So you're ending up with malayam, dattayam, bala, agayan. Again, something to be mindful of when you are working with the absolute phrases is to make sure that your subject is put in a locative case and your participle agrees with it in gender, number, and case. So with that, this is your Sanskrit instructor signing off with a namaste.